Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and in today's lesson, we're going to be discussing the respective merits of divine and human wisdom. Now, implicit in that statement is that there is a disparity of the wisdom which we can wield and the wisdom which exists in him. Now, there are limits to what we can know, but there is no limit to what he knows. He knows all that there is to know and all that can be known. His attribute is omniscience, which speaks of infinite intelligence, and we are finite beings and must exist with our limitations and and trust his wisdom and eschew our own. Now, when we say God is wise, that is a technically correct statement, but it's no understatement to suggest that it is quite an understatement. The wisdom does not even scratch the surface of his intelligence and his omniscience, and the psalmist alludes to the extent of his omniscience in the 147th Psalm, the 5th verse thereof. He writes, "Great is our master, and mighty in power. There is no limit to his understanding." So that's the twin attributes of omnipotence and omniscience. Omnipotence is unlimited strength and power. Omniscience is unlimited intelligence. So there's literally no limit to his understanding. He knows all that there can be known, all that there is to know, and he is incapable of learning because he knew it, to begin with, everything that there is to know or can be known. And there is the distinction between earthly or human wisdom and the divine is thus elucidated on by James in the 3rd chapter, 13th through 17th verse. He writes, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his good behavior, his works, and meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and self-seeking in your hearts, you do not boast against the law and lie against the truth. This is not the wisdom coming down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and self-seeking are, there is confusion in every foul deed. But the wisdom from above is first clean, then peaceable, gentle, ready to obey, filled with mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." So he outlines some of the symptoms of earthly or demonic or unspiritual wisdom, which are confusion and compromised works. So the wiser we are, the better our works will be. And he outlines some of the manifestation of divine wisdom, thus as peaceable. So the commotion, the accumulation of worldly wisdom creates commotion in the mind, but that which is divine induces a peace and solace. Gentle, again, this is a reflection of the works in the rooted in wisdom. Obedience is an organ of spiritual knowledge and identified as such in by authors such as John and Solomon. And the most foolish obedient person is, in the final analysis, wiser than the wisest disobedient person. And mercy and good fruits, this is another manifestation of he who basks in divine wisdom without partiality. That means it harbors no prejudice. It examines each respective claim according to their merits and in balance and thoroughness and without hypocrisy. Now, worldly wisdom can be full of hypocrisy in the foolishness that it reduces those who trust in it. And Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9 elucidates on the disparity of divine and human cognitive capacities, and he writes, "For my thoughts are not yours thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares Yahweh. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So he's frankly and explicitly outlining the superiority of his wisdom and ways to that which exists among man. And there's no qualitative comparison between them, and he uses the analogy of the heavens and the earth. The distance between them are the distance which exists between what we know and all there is to know, which is known perfectly and fully and thoroughly and instantly by the Father in heaven. And the next passage we're going to read is Romans 10, 1 through 3. This is Paul writing, "Truly, brothers, my heart's desire in prayer to Elohim for Israel is for salvation. For I bear them witness that they have an ardor for Elohim, but not according to knowledge. For not knowing the righteousness of Elohim and seeking to establish their own righteousness, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of Elohim." So John, in his living water discourse, instructs us, or the Savior through John, John records the Savior as instructing us to worship in spirit and truth. So the Jews had the former but lacked the latter. So for all their zeal and ardor and works and good intentions, they were not practicing their religion in accordance to the knowledge which they had been provided, and they saw fit to substitute their own righteousness for that which Elohim can uniquely provide, namely in the form of his son, Yahshua Messiah, who the Jews rejected. And the next passage we're going to read is Proverbs 14:12. This is also duplicated verbatim in Proverbs 16:25. And it reads, "There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death." So as the saying goes, our best thinking gets us into the worst kind of troubles. We trick ourselves into our own cleverness. Our cleverness can induce ultimately confusion in us because we are ensnared by the ostensible cleverness of it. But there is a disparity between cleverness and wisdom, which we can elucidate upon, but we're not going to. We're going to instead turn to Proverbs 12:15. Which reads, "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who listens to advice is wise." So the fool is a know-it-all without really knowing it all. They are convinced in the superiority of their ways and refuse to take counsel or advice or listen to wiser men. Now, a learned man, if he wishes to become more learned, must expose himself and surround himself to those who are more learned than he. But the fool, this they will not do. And Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 7 communicates the imperative of not trusting in our own wisdom, but leaning on his. And Solomon writes, "Trust in Yahweh with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Know him in all your ways, and he makes all your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yahweh, and turn away from evil." Now, this is not to categorically dismiss our divinely appointed rational faculties. It is only to suggest that we not rely excessively upon them. Elohim wants us to be wise, and he wants us to exercise the rationality and cognitive capacities which he has endowed us with. But it would be the height of folly to trust in them at the expense of one from whom all wisdom is derived. And so the totality of trust and faith is implicit with the three-letter word all your heart. That means to give it your all and to hold back nothing, and lean not on your own understanding. Now, our own understanding is prone to deception and trickery, ergo it would be foolish to rely on it or lean on it. And acknowledge him in all your ways. Now, the key word is acknowledgement, because the wise person left to their own devices will retreat into their own wisdom and the accumulation of information that they have gathered through independent inquiry. But that is no substitute for leaning on the one whose wisdom transcends any wisdom we can muster. And the first three chapters of Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians deals extensively throughout many of the passages in all three chapters about the inferiority of human wisdom. We're actually going to be working backwards. We're going to begin in 1 Corinthians 3, 18 through 20, which reads, "Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become foolish, so that he might become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with Elohim. For it has been written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, Yahweh knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are worthless." So the paradox is that Rather than continuing in the path of self-reliance on our own wisdom, we are to forsake it and become fools, work from a blank slate in order to lay truths that we were incompetent to behold in our present orientation. We must become foolish in order to become wise. That is a paradox, but a valid one. And the wisdom of the world, all the wisdom the world can muster in all the ages, is deemed foolishness by him who created the world. And he catches the wise in their craftiness, so the wise can deceive many people, but you can fool some of the people some of the time, and you can, but you can't fool all the people all the time, and you can never ever hope to fool Elohim. And he esteems and evaluates the thoughts of the wise and deems them worthless, that it means they are without value in the grand scheme of things. And now we're going to turn to 2 Corinthians verse 1, which reads, "And when I came to you, brothers, I did not come with excellence of speech or wisdom, proclaiming to you the witness of Elohim." So Paul eschews the rhetorical flourishes of the sophist, who were sophisticated practitioners of rhetoric in ancient Greece. He preferred the simplicity of approach and did not convey the appearance of being wise, yet what he had to say was infinitely wiser than the more sophisticated rhetoricians, and there was a purpose for this in order for them to lay claim of the gospel in all its simplicity. And now verses 5 through 7, "In order that your faith should not be in the wisdom of men, but in the power of Elohim. Yet we speak wisdom among those who are perfect, and not the wisdom of the age, nor of the rulers of this age, that are being brought to naught. But we speak the wisdom of Elohim, which was hidden in a secret, and which Elohim ordained before the ages of our esteem." So all the wisdom he claims and lays hold to, he does not credit himself, but it existed before him in the councils of eternity, and it trumps the existing wisdom on the world at any age, at any time. And the purpose was that their faith could be enhanced and not directed in the counterproductive direction of the wisdom of man, because the good news eschews and transcends the wisdom of the world and basks in the power of Elohim. And the next passages we're going to read is verses 13 through 16 in the same chapter. "Which we also speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teaches, but with the Ruach Kadesh teaches, comparing spiritual with spiritual. But the natural man does not receive that of the Spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him, and he is unable to know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he who is spiritual indeed discerns all, but he himself is discerned by no one. For who has known the mind of Yahweh? Who shall instruct him? But we have the mind of Messiah." So once more he reiterates that the words he speaks are not human wisdom, not reflective thereof, but he speaks what the Ruach Kadesh teaches him, and the carnal, unregenerate, and degenerate mind is cognitively incapable of grasping spiritual truths, but in fact regards them as foolishness. Little do they know that they are acting like fools and treating that which is significant trivially. And they can only be spiritually discerned. Now, the discernment of spirit, it discerns all, not just specifically spiritual matters, but temporal as well. But he remains a mystery, so one of the consequences of living in wisdom is that one invariably is misunderstood in as much as they try to make complex concepts understood. But the impenetrable depths of the mind of Elohim are alluded to, and the foolishness of even attempting to instruct him or advise him. And Paul picks up this also in Romans 11:33 through 35. Then we're going to go back to 1 Corinthians, where he writes, "Oh, the depth of riches and wisdom and knowledge of Elohim! How unsearchable his judgments and untraceable his ways! For who has known the mind of Yahweh, or who has become his counselor, or who has first given to him, and it shall be given back?" So there's an abyss of the unknown which exists between Elohim, who is not only omniscient but incomprehensible. Our finite faculties cannot comprehend him, at least not fully. That is not to discourage us from pursuing to know all that we can about it. It is only to say that if we expect to attain a perfect knowledge of him, we are in for a rude awakening. And once more, he reiterates the foolishness and futility of attempting to counsel him who needs no counsel, because he not only knows everything there is to know, but cannot be taught anything, because he already, the embodiment of infinite knowledge already exists in him and subsists in him. Now we're going to return to 1 Corinthians verses, first chapter 17 through 27. This is the most extensive extrapolation on the respective merits of divine and human wisdom. And Paul writes, "For Messiah did not send me to baptize, but to bring the good news, not with wisdom of words, that the cross of Messiah should be of none effect. For the word of the cross is indeed foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of Elohim. For it has been written, I shall destroy the wisdom of the wise, and put aside the learning of the learned ones. Where is the wise? Where is the scholar? Where is the debater of this age? Has not Elohim made foolishness the wisdom of the world? For since the wisdom of Elohim, the world through wisdom, did not know Elohim, it pleased Elohim through the foolishness of preaching to save those who believe. And since Jews ask a sign, and Greeks seek wisdom, yet we proclaim Messiah crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jew and Greek, Messiah the power of Elohim, and the wisdom of Elohim. For the foolishness of Elohim is wiser than men, and the weakness of Elohim is stronger than men. For look to your calling, brethren, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. But Elohim has chosen the foolish of the world to put to shame the wise, and Elohim has chosen the weak of the world to put to shame the strong." So there's a lot to digest in the passage. We're going to break it down from the top. Paul once again reiterates the style and substance of his preaching as rooted in some simplicity and not the wisdom of the world or polished rhetoric or eloquent speech. But his main goal is to communicate the cross, and the efficacy of the message is diminished by rhetorical flourishes, which may make the preacher look or sound good, but ultimately diminishes the one in whose name they proclaim. And the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. Again, spiritual matters cannot be discerned by the carnal mind, which is inexorably perishing. And but to those who are saved, those who have assurance of salvation, they find the wisdom and the power of the cross. And Yahweh can instantly destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the learning of the scholars of any age. And no matter what variety or component they manifest in, whatever type of scholar they are, it's all the same to him. He renders foolishness any wisdom they can muster. And the world's wisdom is incompetent to behold Elohim. So what does Elohim do? He displays his wisdom through what the world deems to be foolish preaching in order to save those who believe. And the Jews they were people of miracles. They had a rich tradition of miracles, which had caused them to trust in miracles. And the Greeks had a storied tradition of philosophical wisdom. So these were their signs of pride, and they had faith and reliance in these things. Yet the crucified Messiah was a stumbling block to the Jews because it upset many of their cherished delusions about what the Messiah, their preconceptions of what he would be. They did not envision that their Messiah would be so brutally executed, and it was, of course, foolishness to the Greeks because no philosophy can explain it. But the foolishness of Elohim is infinitely superior to any wisdom men can muster. The same disparity in proportion to weakness and strength. And those who comprise the church are not especially admirable in the measure of the world as measured by wisdom and nobility and strength. But Elohim chose them to shame the wise and to weaken the strong. So therein we read the paradox of the good news, which uplifts the slave and humbles the ruler, and also makes the wise fool and the foolish wise. And we're just going to close with Colossians 2:8, which Paul writes, "See to it that no one makes a prey of you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary matters of the world, and not according to Messiah." So all the wisdom that the world can muster is only wise inasmuch as it respects the fundamentals of our faith. So he's advising the Colossians, and through them, by proxy and vicariously, posterity, to not put their faith in the worldly wisdom, which was then in currency. Now the philosophies are unique to every age, but the principle is the same in all their varieties and components, inasmuch as they do not respect or acknowledge the wisdom of Elohim as expressed through Yahshua. They are themselves foolish, and they are a trapdoor to anyone who is seduced by their snares. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.